just a couple. But to start out, we're gonna talk about, it's called Walking on the Wind. And I bought this in North Carolina last year. It's basically Cherokee, like spiritual teachings, and things like that. It's pretty cool. I assume you can get this online, but I bought it in person just from the gift shop. But it's a Native American healing and like spiritual teachings. It's a pretty cool book. It's written from a Cherokee Indian. And it just kind of talks about some of his beliefs, some of his experiences as a kid, like growing up and everything. It's a pretty cool book. I would highly recommend it. Another book that's kind of similar that I like is it's called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. You might have heard of this one. It's like really old. It's about 2,000 years old, I think. It's a pretty good book. It's written by Marcus Aurelius from AD 121. And he's basically talking about the same thing, like spiritual and ethical reflections. He talks about some like ruling. It kind of reminds me of The Prince, but like a little bit less. Like political, like problematic, I guess. Like The Prince is kind of not the, like parts of it are not the best necessarily, but this one doesn't have quite as much of that kind of stuff in it. It's pretty cool. So yeah, this is a good book. I bought this online on Amazon for like $5, $6, $7. It's really cheap, just like the paperback. It's pretty cheap. Another one that now this is probably my favorite one out of all the ones we're talking about. The Alchemist. I love this book. It's really good. And it's kind of similar to these other ones, but this one is more of like a story, right? Like it's an actual book. It's not like nonfiction or anything. The thing is, it has like a lot of the themes of those other like spiritual, more like, I guess, enlightenment type books. But this one is more like just an actual story. It's like a book. So this one on the back, it says, to realize one's destiny is a person's only obligation. I think that's kind of a cool idea. That sets the theme for like the rest of the book. It's mainly about like kind of it's about like a kid or like a younger guy. It kind of goes off on his own and kind of like makes his own life, right? And like figures stuff out, sometimes the hard way, but like it's just it's definitely an interesting read. And it's out of all the ones that I've mentioned so far, it's definitely the easiest to read. Definitely like the most interesting, I would say, because it's more of like an actual book. So, and then the final one is The Untethered Soul, and this one is kind of similar to the rest, kind of fitting with that theme. But this one is definitely more like self-help and more like mental type things. So one of the things that this book mentions is about like your inner monologue and the fact that like you can kind of tune in and out to different channels, is what it calls it. Because like you're the observer is sort of the idea behind that. Like you're not necessarily the voice speaking, you are the one hearing the thoughts. So it's definitely an interesting thing, but it kind of shows that like if you have like good, bad, whatever, I don't know if you would call them good or bad thoughts, but just sort of like more negative, more positive thoughts, you're not necessarily those thoughts, right? It's kind of confusing, but this book does a really good job of breaking it down into like an easy to understand way. So this one is really good. But out of the ones that we've talked about so far, The Alchemist is definitely gonna be the top one. This one's really good. I highly recommend it. this one is like sort of outside of the sphere of what we've been talking about for most of this. So this one is like just a straight up book. It is The Secret History, and it is extremely long. It is like 600 pages, I think, which might not be a ton to some people, but I've never read a book that long until I read this one. But like, it surprisingly kept your interest. It's actually a very interesting book. It's pretty cool. I like it a lot. I read it a couple years ago, but The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This one's not very expensive either. So yeah, those are kind of the books that we're going to talk